So as I kind of mentioned earlier, if we can focus on recruiting class questions first, and as we wrap that up, we've got some time left, we'll have Coach available to take general questions about preparing for the Belk Bowl. So with that, we'll have Coach make some opening comments, and then we'll go to questions.
Yeah. So really pleased with our efforts and the results of this class, our 2019 class. So I believe that organizations are perfectly designed for the results they get. I was taught that through organizational behavior over the past number of years, and with Carla's help, we've been able to add additional resources in our personnel department. And I think that's reflected partly in the quality of this class. So I think that was one contributor to the improvement that we've shown. The second influencer is just simply it's year 3, and we're making progress that is clear and noticeable and transparent for all to see. So the combination of progress with resources is now combining to produce a stronger result. This class, I think, is very good for the University of Virginia, meaning that of this class, I think 14 of the players are strong academically, well over a 3.0 grade point average. There's a couple that have 4.0s. Within that, 12 of the 19 or so are multi-sport athletes, which means they do a lot of different things. So when you talk about the quality of people, the versatility which they have, the kind of students, and then Division I football players at the ACC level, they're perfect fits for us. There has been no significant changes on signing day, which we have an organizational or guiding principle which says less drama, more work. So this was not one of those days where our coaches were pulling our hair out. We just simply had the players that were committed. They signed because they were committed, and we went out to practice. And so that's also reflective of the trust that's been established between player and coach under the guiding principles of the program. And so that also was very positive. I think the class, again, we're always looking for greater than, not equal to, in everything in our program. And this is in relation to our first class that our staff signed. We played 17 of those players, which was 4th most in college football. That was the 17 class. 18's class, based on one report, said that we were the 6th youngest roster in college football. And so you'll have to verify that. That now leads us to this class, which is our 3rd class, which is basically 3/4 of the way done in terms of having 4 consecutive classes with 4 consecutive years of improvement, and the results that then show that not only on the field but through recruiting. I think we addressed needs that had to be addressed. Certainly with the graduation at running back of Jordan Ellis, we needed a really strong running back, and with both Seneca and Michael, we feel very strong there. We continue to look to expand and build our outside receiving core, which we think is still at a deficit in terms of numbers, and so we added good players on the outside that I think will really help us in Nathaniel and Dorian and Dontavian, and so I feel really good about that. We continue to put emphasis into our offensive front by not only size, mindset, but by ability and numbers. We've addressed that. We needed to expand our defensive front in terms of quality play and depth, and so 2 very good young prospects there. In Jawan and Ben, really like them. Our linebackers are already strong. We added to that, and we added more speed in our secondary. So really, in addition to all that, the next version of quarterback also was signed in R.J. Harvey. So almost all areas, at least at the initial stages of the class, as far as we can evaluate through high school, have been addressed and met at a high level. And so I'm encouraged, excited, and think momentum has been generated for our program, for our team, and for all parties around the program. So I'll be glad to take questions if there are some.
Also, Coach, I'd like to talk about two of the guys you signed kind of late, Tenye Dixon, the quarterback, and Nathaniel Bill, you just mentioned. How confident were you that you were going to get those guys coming into today?
So the two players, Tenye Dixon visited this past weekend, and Coach Howell had done a really nice job recruiting him. He had committed to another institution previously, and as our needs and shifted slightly, that became a really strong possibility. On the visit, I felt really good that we had a great chance, and then early on after the visit on Sunday, we received his commitment, which he held. And so that's pretty typical with us, is commitments do hold. And so I was confident as of Sunday that that would happen, and it did. Nathaniel's visit was earlier, after having been committed to another institution for quite some time. He visited, and it was just a natural fit. And so Nathaniel in particular has really nice size. We call players with that size always open, meaning that most corners that are matched up against them, there aren't many 6'3" or 6'4" or 6'5" corners. And so whether they're behind him or not, they're always open. We wanted more size on the outside. We wanted more productivity, and we needed more consistency. And so Nathaniel, man, that was a really nice addition to this class, and we're really excited about him.
I was curious about your two running backs, and what specifically do you like about their games?
Yeah, really distinct in style. Mike Hollins is the next version of J.E. With probably more speed and more productivity coming out of high school. I think he was the best running back in the state of Louisiana. He was the MVP of the state championship game. I think he's powerful. I think he has great vision. I think he's durable. I think he's tough. And, man, is he productive. And so I really like him. But when I say comparable to J.E., you'll see his body is similar. He's physical and he's compact, but he's also dynamic. And so probably the next version in terms of big play threat in addition to what J.E. is. So we really like that as a comparison, because that's the greatest compliment I could give Mike, is to compare him to J.E. And then if you watch what he's done at the highest level, really, of Louisiana football, I think he's very good, and his numbers say that or show that. Seneca is extremely fast, quick, explosive, dynamic, hard to find, hard to catch, hard to tackle, and he scores a lot of touchdowns. And he can play a bunch of different positions, meaning quarterback, meaning receiver, meaning running back, anything where the ball can be in his hands, that's where we want him. We like him for his size. We also think he's physical. He's one of the fastest players in the country as well in the 100 meters. And so, yeah, lots of big play potential. And so when you put those two together in the backfield, our production and the dynamic nature of what we can do in the run game starts to become, I think, more powerful.
Coach, you haven't always, I guess, let us talk to freshmen, right? Jawan Briggs seems like to me the kind of kid that maybe you should reconsult, take that under advisement or something. Have you ever met a kid who was both that talented on the field but that well-rounded off of it? And how would you sort of measure him against other guys you've recruited?
Yeah, I don't think it's measurable for him against someone else. I remember on his visit, my wife and I, Holly, were visiting with him, and he told us he played 10 instruments, and so that puts him in a pretty elite class. I would say of all the signees in this year's class at any level of football, anyone else that plays 10 instruments. And then I just saw a video of his Christmas performance duet. If you haven't seen that online, I highly recommend that. My family and I have watched that many, many times now. He's exceptional, and visiting his high school, which is phenomenal. There's private rooms where violin and piano and voice is all being practiced. One of the choir teachers stopped and stopped his class, and they gave us an impromptu a cappella presentation just because we were there. By the way, when Juwan got he left his class, which was engineering. They were building chairs out of cardboard to see which could be the most weight bearing, and so there was that competition going on, which followed a roller coaster competition design that was previous year. So there was engineering, there were the arts, and then every class it was just engaged. And so Jawan he's a Renaissance man. He's UVA, and he could probably walk into any field here and have success right from the beginning. And in terms of the policy, yeah, you'll still have to wait, and we'll just let the momentum build for that, and then unleash him.
I know you're not very big on star ratings and such, but when you do sign a young man who is as acclaimed as Jawan, does it affect outside perception of your program, and is that something that you welcome?
So in all three parts, yes, I'm not big on star ratings. As a baseline, it certainly does affect perception, because there's rankings that happen and it's reportable, right? Signing day is reportable, so class rankings and stars, there's an outcome from that, which then generates momentum, or sometimes can hurt momentum based on what your class looks like. So our momentum generated by this class, by outside and objective raters, has this class fairly high, which means that there's a perception of momentum and positive things happening at UVA. In this particular case, it just happens to be right. We are gaining momentum. The class is strong. And so, yeah, it just was one of those things that aligns. And I'm excited about that. And I think it has a really nice benefit to our program. But again, that's coinciding partly with the progress that's been made already, specifically with the 2 recruiting classes that our staff has brought, and the 2 bowl games that they've yielded, and the recruits simply see that this is just the beginning, and they more and more want to be part of it.
What can you say about the wide receivers in this class? Just taking a look at the 3 of them, all of them are big guys, and especially guys like Dorian Goddard coming from a good high school like Greenville High School.
We love winners and state champions. I believe there was three state champions in this class. Dorian, man, the number of catches alone is really really impactful and really impressive. But we wanted size, we wanted speed, and again, we want players that are always open. And so Dorian was one of our earliest commits at receiver, and we really like his productivity. Dontavian is the youngest in the game and maturity, but then when you watch some of the dunks that he has in basketball and some of the dynamic measurables, and his upside is tremendous with really nice size also. And then Nathaniel Beal, as I've already talked about, the tallest and longest of them all, with not only downfield ability, but this matchup that is always problematic for a defense. So again, it was targeted specifically. We need more yield from our outside receivers, and so we targeted that specifically, and I like the 3 players that we landed.
Bronco back here. How would you just describe your strategy when recruiting Do you want a quarterback in every class to kind of build that hierarchy, or what's the strategy at that position?
Yeah, the succession planning at quarterback has been one of the first things we had to address, and just now am I starting to get comfortable. So we have Bryce, and then currently behind Bryce we have Brennan, and then we also have Lindell. And so there's 3 quarterbacks that I think are capable. Lindell is a completely different style than the other 2, but what Brennan has already shown is in alignment but not identical to what Bryce can do, so that allowed some consistency. What I would love is a quarterback in each class. That's my ideal. So you have a 4th year, 3rd year, 2nd year, 1st year, and then you're recruiting one. So that's my ideal. We will have, before this class finishes, you'll see 5 quarterbacks on scholarship by the time this class is finished. We really liked RJ, and there was a game we watched, and his team was playing against one of the top 50 running backs in the country, and RJ at quarterback we thought was a significantly better running back than the running back that's all he played. and Bryce would be similar. And so RJ's packaging is much more Marcus Hagans-ish, and we're hoping the result is Marcus Hagans-ish in terms of the dynamic player. So he's not built the same as Bryce, but wow, is he dynamic and effective, and to really help this team play well. So my ideal answer to the question is to have one in each class, with one being recruited, and that's for the first time we're going to be at that point.
Coach, a two-part question. First, especially the top half of this class, very defense heavy. Was that by design?
Not necessarily. Sometimes it just works by when players choose to make up their minds and when they intend to commit. So we've been really clear and really intentional on all of our players and what specifications we want. And Coach Soto, again, did a really nice job with the defensive line, Coach Papinga and Coach Hunter. There will be one more player that will be added this evening at probably 6 o'clock. That will close out the signing day for today. And so Coach Papinga and Coach Hunter at linebacker and Coach Howell in the secondary, we've been together just so long that there's a different level of momentum, and they think as I think, so there's a little less translation that needs to happen just because we've been in the same room so long and we're clearer, maybe in a little bit clearer of that, what it is on our offensive side.
And the overall team speed of this class, I mean, Cypress, Williams, Millage, all these guys are state track champions. Was it a goal to improve the team speed with this class?
It is. Speed usually leads to scoring, and anytime you have three players that are all anywhere from 10.4 to 10.600 meters, that starts to look very effective. In the secondary, it's recovery speed. When you're a ball carrier, it's hard to recover to catch up to someone running that fast.
You had mentioned Nathaniel earlier having been committed elsewhere. How did that relationship start after he decided that he was no longer going to Iowa State, and how did it evolve from that?
We were looking specifically for long and tall and productive and talented receivers, and that doesn't exclude us from talking to or reaching out to those that are committed elsewhere. And as we reached out and started that relationship, there became a sincere interest from Nathaniel back to us because of the academics, because of the need, and then the style of play, but also where we are in the program and the impact that he could have. And so that all started this intrigue, which then just blossomed into a recruiting visit not too long ago. So you're talking basically about a year-long relationship with an institution he was committed to, and then a pretty short and fast turnaround, which means the impact that was made and just the clear fit between both parties. That has to be like that, or it doesn't override that long a relationship. In this case, it did. We saw that, they felt that, and knew it as well. And so I think he benefited by being able to come to the University of Virginia, and we certainly benefited by having him join us.
And then you have mentioned previously kind of the jarring transition you found in the recruiting dynamic at Brigham Young, where your acceptance rate was nearly half, to here where it started like in the 8 to 9 to 1 range. Are you finding your acceptance ratio is now improving, or are you still kind of in that range that you had mentioned?
No, significantly improved, partly because we're more intentional now after we've learned and are still learning. I guess the point of reference of UVA, where we currently are in the market, establishing relationships in our footprint, and then knowing exactly who to go after and what are the key predictors, that has, and then with the success we're having, that has made the rate of number of recruits to commitment significantly lower. So it's still not ideal. I would say probably 5 or 4 to 1 is where it is now, but in relation to where it was, and we've closed the gap and made significant improvement. So part of it is relationships, part of it is knowledge of our current circumstances, but then knowing our existing team, now seeing the Coastal, now seeing the ACC, and becoming more clear and more specific on exactly what we need. All of that has combined to make it to where the number of players recruited isn't having to be as large as it was to get the commitments we need.
I know the offensive line has been something that's been on your mind since you got here. How do these three guys fit into your vision?
Yeah, there is the size and ability is part of it. The mindset is also part of it. So it's not only what we're going to do, it's how we're going to do it, and we think those are equal parts. To have the size and ability without the mindset to help us win the Coastal and take over the ACC, that would be a deal breaker. And so we're really looking for both. Do they have enough ability and do they have the mindset? And so, man, we've put a lot of time and effort into this group to solidify both those things. And we're now, again, having enough success and we're generating enough momentum where we're able to choose and select and at a little bit higher level, and we are becoming more desirable. And so the quality is going up not only on the field, but it's also going up mindset-wise. And so, again, this group has to be better than our last group, and next year has to be better than that. Again, just to continue, that's nothing against our current players, but just to continue the growth and progress needed for the program to make the kind of strides we continue to need and desire. And knowing that as you reach a certain number of wins, success in our bowl game would mean 8. 9 wins is a lot harder to get than 8. Those kind of jumps become harder just to get one more. And so who you bring in has a lot of impact on that. Our current players, their job then is they have to train so fiercely that they don't get past. And ultimately then that friction elevates the whole group, which is what we need. So we not only need numbers, but we need mindset. And I think this class and these additions will be really helpful.
Bronco, you've had some landmark moments the last couple of years, winning at Boise State, beating Miami, going to the second straight bowl. How tangible is the effect of those things during recruiting?
It is, I don't know what percentage to put on it, but it's tangible, it's noticeable, and everywhere we go now, no matter what school, the sentiment is, man, holy cow, you guys are getting better, and holy cow that you're going back to postseason, and what's happening at Virginia. So it's just kind of the same narrative wherever we go, and so many teams then, or so many people then jump right to, wow, there's 2 overtime games. That could have been 9. You guys could be at 9. And so they're seeing how close it is, and there's this optimism of not only are we going back to postseason back-to-back, but they're saying, wait, this realistically could have been even more than that in year 3, which isn't much of a stretch. And so all that is generating this excitement as to a couple more plays or a couple more players. And I think folks are thinking we're closer than maybe what 7 wins showed. And so momentum is what's happening, and it's real and it's tangible regardless of state, regardless of the high school we walk into. And so totally noticeable, much more so this year than last year. Just as I've been out on the road.
I ask this question every year, and I'll ask it again. So as you go forward now, what are some needs that you feel like this class still has? What are some things that maybe you wish were different about this group, and now that you have a little bit of time to address that before the more traditional National Signing Day?
Yeah, so I really feel like our needs have been addressed. So we could stop now, and I'm comfortable and confident and happy with our class and really excited about the direction and the future of our program. If you then start to say extra credit, or what now is possible, there's always bridges, and so we could still use another bridge in terms of a graduate transfer or 2. Offensive line, still we need a graduate transfer if we're talking extra credit. We don't need one, but it would be an extra. Same thing at receiver, outside receiver. A graduate transfer would help give us an additional number there. Those 2 positions are probably at the biggest deficit still in terms of succession planning, numbers, and ability for what I'd like to see. The next position would be possibly another defensive lineman. If we could find an exceptional defensive lineman similar to Jawan, Ben Smiley, if we could find another player similar to those 2, it would be in that order. If I were then saying to finish this, even though right now I'm good, but if to say, okay, if we kept working and there were possibilities, where might they be? Probably there.
Coach, you mentioned when you got here how hard it was to recruit in-state. I believe you have 3 in-state guys in this class. I'm just curious, over the last 2 years, what are your thoughts on how you've recruited in the state, and how do you approach that going forward?
Yeah, I think we're improving significantly, and most of that has happened because doors are being opened with our progress, and it's so noticeable. And so the intrigue now is opening doors, and players are more interested, and again, relationships are being established with my staff and the high school coaches, and then so many of them are coming to see us practice, and what they thought and then what they see, they usually leave very impressed, and there's just momentum that's being generated. And we have a saying in our program, right, that trust is built with time and consistency. So it's now been 3 years of time with consistency of behavior, treatment, and results. And so trust is starting to be established, which yields results.
Take our last recruiting question here from Damon, then we'll switch gears over to the Belk Bowl.
Bronco, you mentioned at the beginning about the additional staff for recruiting that you've been able to bring on. How do they help? Just like what roles are they in, and
Sure.
how much of an impact have they had?
Man, so in terms of the roles, we were approximately half-staffed in relation to our competitors when I arrived in the personnel area. And so there are what are called, it depends on which organization, recruiting specialists, but all they do from the minute they arrive at work to the time they go home is finding, which means they're, or you can call them regional coordinators, where they have areas and they're responsible for every high school, every player within that footprint or that region, to mine them, find them, and then put them through the evaluation process. Before we had those additional people, our coaches then, after practice, were then doing that, which we were just simply late and behind. Some other staffs were finding and mining 24/7, that's an exaggeration, during the workday, while we were then coaching and then doing that, and we couldn't catch up fast enough. And so the regional coordinators or recruiting specialists, then the volume of players that we're finding in relation to the specific needs that we have is happening early, faster, and more accurate. That is happening while we're practicing. And so those two things have just, and then with the momentum of how we're playing, that also is reflective of the coaches not having to recruit as much. So the playing product is improving while the finding is happening at the same time, and those two things are merging in a way that just is significantly different. Without the resources, it would be really difficult. And so, again, Carla has been really helpful in identifying that need right off, giving us the resources to develop our roster. And so I think the results certainly show that. I can't say it's all the organization, but it's a huge part. The progress we're making on the field, it's a combination of both those.
Coach, what's it going to be like going up against a tough South Carolina team that throws the ball a lot, but y'all have a great defensive backs that can really stop this team?
Yeah, the game is a challenge, no question. With the growth and progress of our program, that continues to earn us maybe more prestigious bowls on bigger stages against better teams, and that's where we want to be. That usually uncovers all the learnings and all the things that need to happen to develop your program, and certainly we'd like to do that with a victory. That is the reason you go to postseason. We've just we think the SEC is a strong conference. We've already seen, obviously, South Carolina on film, and if you were then to say who might you compare them to that we've played, talent-wise at receiver, talent-wise personnel, probably North Carolina State would be the closest team that we've played that might resemble. Hard to know until you've played, but say, okay, what's the point of reference? It's probably them. But we think they're talented. We think they're well coached, and every game has been close for them, much like us. The ones they've won and the ones they've lost, there's not much difference in there. So we like the matchup a lot for year 3 in our program. We like the SEC opponent, and man, has it been great to have the extra practices. We just had 8 practices, which were spring practices with our travel backups in our first years, our second years, the guys that haven't been playing much, and we worked really, really hard. And they basically now, yesterday, received kind of end of spring evaluations that happened before the bowl game. So they know exactly where they stand, what they need to work on, what their futures might look like. And man, that to develop our program is priceless, let alone playing the game, which we started on South Carolina prep today.
Down in Charlotte, you use the phrase fast and furious
Yeah.
to describe South Carolina's offense. Tempo-wise, according to the analytics, they most resemble, of the teams you played, North Carolina, Duke, and
Yes.
Liberty, which play at similar paces. Having had that familiarity with pace, Does that help you? Especially you won all three of those games.
The familiarity does help, and years and years of kind of research on how to practice against it certainly has helped. It doesn't guarantee us success, but we do have a familiarity with it. When you add really skilled players to the tempo, that leads to usually more points, and they're a little bit more dynamic than sometimes a team of lesser talent that plays at the same speed. But many times on tape, you'll see defenders running to get aligned, and multiple players looking at the sideline and the ball is snapped. And those are all hidden plays and hidden yardage that happen within a game, and many times they're big plays while the defense just simply breaks mentally, or their organization in terms of communication doesn't happen. So that pressure is applied in a really unique way. It's physical, but probably more mental than anything else, of that constant need to make a play and get lined up again. And so then the scheme, in addition to that, I think is effective. So we have points of reference. We feel comfortable and confident that we will be able to get lined up and play. When you put it all together with their ability, that's why I think they're strong on offense.
A couple of questions, Bronco. A lot of your players said today that their first bowl preparation practice was pretty physical. Were you trying to set the tone for this game?
Yes, I was trying to set the tone. We have work to do, and so while we've talked a lot about progress, I'm very clear also about the amount and the gap still from where we are now to where we want to be, and the clock is ticking. Not only for the program, but I want our team to have success. And yes, we did not ease into it. We charged into it, and we made a statement as to this is what it's going to require. And yeah, I would say that there was adapting that was happening to that mindset, and what it really takes to be successful in postseason. The constant challenge, right, is the depth of the roster versus physical practices and how long can you do it to play. And so we're 2 weeks out, so it will become less physical as we go, but there's a great chance all the way through Saturday it'll look similar like it did today. One other point to that, one of the reasons and motives is simply this team, they made it really clear that it wasn't just okay to go to the game, they want to win the game. And that was all the way before the season started, so I'm trying to help every way possible to facilitate that.
The other things, last week you mentioned South Carolina's passing game. They do some unique things. Is it an extremely sophisticated passing game, or is it just unique in the way they approach things?
So sophistication, to me, the highest level of sophistication is presented through simplicity, where they take all these concepts that are so difficult and it's packaged down to where there's these complements that when you do this, you're vulnerable here. When you do that, you're vulnerable there, and you don't need 20 passes, you only need a couple. And then when you add good players to it, so it's not the complexity, but it is, I would say, the ingenuity, and it's really well thought out. And for everything that you adjust to, there is a weakness presented, and there's usually a good player then that's at the weakness point of attack. So I've been impressed. So with the tempo, with the thought that has gone into their scheme, and then with the talent, I think that they're very good offensively.
Coach, with South Carolina getting so many injured guys back, has that complicated preparations at all? Have you guys had to get creative and go back and find older game film to study?
Our sports information staff, and Vince in particular, has done a really nice job of predicting for us, and he kind of did that legwork, and so we're going off of what he has helped us with. It's difficult to know who's back, at what level they're back, and how long they'll last. And so we're just doing the best we can, and I'm sure they're similar in trying to project who we have coming back.
And SEC teams are known for their defensive front seven, that toughness and physicality you mentioned. Can you compare what you've seen on film out of that to anyone you faced this season?
Yeah, again, I think it's North Carolina State is the closest comparison in terms of talent and ability, not only in the front seven, but probably the entire roster when you look at receivers, quarterback, offensive line, defensive skill, defensive front seven. Again, I'm not saying they're identical, but in terms of a reference point, I think that's probably the closest.
Bronco, what is the status of Hassis Dubois, and are there any other situations like that?
Hassis is, so he was in really good shape coming into practice, and he was hurt in practice today. And so I'm not sure where he stands now as to how significant the injury was.
One more question here in the back.
Coach, is it ironic that you started this year in Charlotte and you're going to end this year in Charlotte?
Yeah, haven't thought about that. Yeah, I guess we'll call that ironic. I think there's maybe a more important part to that is we ultimately want to be in Charlotte earlier than this, playing in the ACC championship game, and we were close enough for that to be a real possibility this year, and so I like the thought of going to that location, being in those locker rooms, being on that field in preparation for what we expect to happen in the future.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Will all that be transcribed? Yes.